Hello, 270, Tactical Crouch, me, Yiska, hello. Special guest May, because she's still not in Overwatch, and most of your favorite players aren't either. That's how I'm gonna enter the show. Congratulations. All of your teams are dead. How's that sound? How's that feel? Does it feel good? The winds of change are coming, Yiska.
Yes.
Does it not feel good?
Feel good to have what exactly?
The wind flowing through your gorgeous German locks.
No.
No, you don't like the wind in your hair? Sticking your head out the window like a little dog?
No. I like the only wind of change that I value is that brings progress. And not
Does
regression.
it though? Does it?
No, it doesn't.
I feel like a certain teams might have a word with you there.
It don't.
But yeah, it's true. A lot of teams tend to float around. Some shoot up, some are high on Molly. But alas, here we are. 2022 offseason has finally begun, and boy howdy, is it been a massacre. But before we get into that, I have to thank our special supporters who make this episode and future episodes very possible. And that's thanks to our patron producers. That's Avril, Vista, Bebe, Battlecrab, Refine Bean, Bruz, Babu, Hao, Picasso, Chris R34444, Kasha67, Lil Shin, Porshop Sammy, Rex Zane, Stuck in Bronze, and our YouTube members, Ice Jello, William Jess, Fish Mam, Fire Element 6, AK, Chris R, Brother, Stuck in Bronze, Samuel Sparza, Adam L, and Sagi Fumi. What's your favorite drop? Who's been the most like successful in the off season thus far for you? Who's like gotten rid of the most? Like, I feel like there's a good like answer here, but maybe this dictates like where we go first. Who is kind of struck out there first for you?
Considering that the only two players that I can definitively say aren't on the chopping block are two superstars, I would say those two teams.
Which
like
two?
I'm void pilled, Joe.
Okay, you're void pilled.
I'm void pilled on this.
This is gonna be another hope pill for me. All right, very good. I know what stance I'm taking.
Me when I'm sitting here just feeling existential dread at whatever is currently happening. Okay, let's not oversell this too much. So I think what I currently feel is that it's the most chaotic off-season we've ever had.
Oh, of course.
I feel like we're definitely doom-pilling in terms of budget. But then again, and I think I shouldn't speak too early. I think I hope if this is the thing that you take away with it, this point in the off-season always feels very, very chaotic. Because everyone has a plan, and it hasn't been proven to survive against the enemy yet, right? So usually this unclutters by, the week or two after the signing window opens. Everyone has like their plan A, what we want to do, blah, blah, blah. People are currently negotiating with free agents and like they're trying to get them to sign them. And some of the free agents are currently still entertaining multiple offers, so nobody knows who they're definitely getting. And then eventually like the cards fall, and then like the top teams have had their pick, the crumbs fall from their mouth, and then everyone else gets to pick up the scraps, right? Mm-hmm. And those teams then need to scramble with new ideas of how they want to build, how they want to market, what is still available. I will say there's never been an off season where the general trends that are being looked at have paradigm shifted as hard as they do. Okay.
I mean,
so the possibilities on the table are nutty nuts, right? Mm-hmm. That's not to say that any of them will actually happen. I think that's probably rather not the case, and that we'll eventually just regress to sanity in some way. I think there are good reasons while everything is a little erratic at the moment. I will say what has been a little concerning is the way everything has been messaged, communicated, the confusion on the player side. There are some pretty big changes coming down the pipe in terms of the teams, in terms of what kind of compensation players generally can expect. Presumably, what what is good, and I guess we'll have to talk about the changes in a second, but like the min salary being adjusted to inflation and everything, that's good. That was needed. I mean, the min salary players were effectively working for 10% less for most of the year anyway. So, but yeah, I don't know. Like currently, it's not been fun. I'm not gonna lie. The amount of babysitting I personally had to do as an outside third party, just trying to help people navigate this jungle, should not be the case. It's a bad sign.
Interesting.
From like trying to communicate what is happening, in terms of like players not knowing any of those deadlines, because of course, if you're being let go by your team and you don't have an agent, you wouldn't necessarily know. From, of course, now we do have them. And all these, sort of lack of transparency where there should be when we're in a big moment of uncertainty for everyone involved. And that's bad news bear for everyone involved. I don't want to doom pill too much. Once again, like I'll promise you in 3 weeks I will think about this differently, just because then everything will feel less chaotic.
Because the situation will be inherently different, right? And that's kind of where I think you kind of skirted around this a little bit with like, you think that with the comment that you thought that there were like some good reasons as to why this is, right? I think one of the easiest ones to overlook in the face of like, oh, budget crunch, nobody's making any money, Butterfingers left us, the aliens aren't contacting us, play the 30 Seconds to Mars clip, we're all gonna die, right? Like, of course, like that's the case. But a lot of these teams have also built these 2022 rosters on a game that they didn't have any experience with, right? I feel like that's like one of those points that just completely gets lost to like the existential doom that I think a lot of people are facing when they see literally the entire New York Excelsior just ejecting their roster and all of these teams just imploding. Is like, is it budget related? Probably. Is it also the fact that like these teams were built for a game that didn't even exist yet? I have to assume that like now that we have an entire year under our belt, we have a much better idea of what's successful in this game. What are people actually looking for? What are these coaches actually like trying to build? What kind of identities are out there? I really think that needs to be underlined for a lot of people, is like, stuff was always going to change because we were building on an idea, and now that idea has been realized, of course there's going to be some very significant changes. Obviously the budget stuff comes in, and that accelerates things like gas on fire. But is it crazy to say that it's to be expected? Is that wild to say?
I mean, some of the factors I didn't anticipate in that form.
Okay.
Mainly the regression in budget for teams, which of course I presume has to be something to do with the league financials at large. And maybe, once again, like every year it's the same. Like every year we say, oh, we're going to correct the salary. Then one team goes nuts. And then that sets the tone for the rest. We'll see how it goes, right? There are some very good reasons as to why budgets probably are a little tighter this year. Mainly, I'm not sure what the current situation is, but the broadcast rights that ran out this year, YouTube. We don't know anything about that yet. That we can only speculate there. I'm not sure what that means. Like, where do the teams go? Right? Like, what about balancing APAC and NA? Are we even going to have APAC and NA? By the way, this is something I genuinely don't have info on. And this is not one thing where you can clip this in 6 months.
Be
and he leaked it. No. I actually don't.
When I'm leaking.
I really don't know, right? So
yeah.
yeah, it's a wild time for sure. It's a wild ride. There's some wild rumors, of course, going around, and I don't want to give too much credence to some of them because, once again, they are just reactions or thoughts of where that might go, depending on what the market situation will be. What I will say is, I think what is very concerning to me is the following, just from the outside. There's an organization that promoted their regional rivalry, did more homestands than they needed to, went through a long process of having a documentary series of their 5-year-long franchise and have a long history in Overwatch, that also won the league, and they are letting everyone explore options. That's not a great, like, if anyone, like, just from what I think to know of Hastro is that's an owner that wants to brand build around the best teams, right? He has the best team this year.
Yeah.
I think feasibly you could say they were either the best team or the second best team in season 5, right? So you probably want to at least hold on to that core. But for some reason, he has allowed everyone to explore options. And whether or not he still intends to sign everyone back or just the most important players, right? That communicates some urgency to me that doesn't feel great. And I can tell you that didn't feel great for others in the league looking onto that, other head coaches that I talked to.
Right.
I hope this is just like a way for, because what I can imagine, like if you win the league, you probably want to renegotiate your contract, want to go like, okay, we want some reward, where then someone has to say, I'm sorry, but we can't give you X% more, right? But if you want to, you can explore your options in the league and can test your market value. And if you get the money there, that's the best thing or this is the most respectful thing we can do for you who brought the championship to us. That's my charitable reading of this, right? It's just an organization that has invested so much into this and honestly should be reaping the benefits, at least in revenue, maybe not, in profits. Pulling a move like this hopefully doesn't communicate too crass of an image, right? It could, but it could also just be a move of fairness and like basically making a check mark under a very successful campaign and starting anew. That's also possible, right? It's just...
I think that the former leads itself to what I think Castro has historically done, though. I feel like he's been very player-centric. I feel like he's always tried to work in the best interest of the players, but also attempt his best hand, trying to play the best players he possibly can, trying to field a world-class team, even though maybe season 1 it wasn't the best. But there was no, like, and they kind of talk about this in their docu-series, but, if you put yourself back in that mindset of 2017, 2018, envious season 1, Apex champions, respectable finishes in later Apex seasons, they come in, they win contender season 0. This should be a world-class team. Ended up not being a world-class team, but there was no like reason to like view it otherwise, right? I feel like Hastro and the Fuel and the now Optic organization have always tried to field the best possible team, to strive for world-class talent, but also to respect the players as best they can. And yes, it communicates an inability to re-up and renegotiate and to pay a premium for a championship caliber team, which this roster, or at least the core of it, is. I think there are some pieces that could be shaved off, but for the most part, this is a world-class team. That said, I don't know. I feel like you're kind of spot on the money with the former example of you know, them allowing them to really test the market, and if you can get a competitive offer that fits better for you, then take it. That's the best thing that the organization can give them, and I feel like that's kind of proven with their track record. Personally,
I had a tweet this week where I outlined some weird interaction that we're currently seeing in the league, which is that practically, or a lot of folks have posted LFTs, right? And there are more LFTs than there are contracts expiring or options not being picked up. There are LFTs of players that are under current contracts.
Mm-hmm.
And there are players that also will have to be bought out.
Sure.
It's not that these orgs are willing to let them go for free. They are currently fishing. Okay?
Yeah.
So, okay. Let me explain. This is your... Eric, do a timestamp. We're explaining the options stuff right now. Okay? So, currently, Overwatch League contracts are either 1-year contracts without an option. That was the case for all the American Tornado players, which is an interesting one, and it's definitely an outlier contract. Okay? The normal, most often seen contract is a 1+1, meaning you have 1 year, and then you get a 1 option year, where only the org can decide to sign you for an additional year. Whether or not you will be paid the same salary, or if you get a raise, will have to be negotiated. Often it goes up a little bit, right? In terms of, rewarding you. Okay. There's also stuff like 2+1s. 2 guaranteed years, where no option needs to be triggered. Or 1+2s, where there's 2 option years, right? I haven't heard of those a lot. By the way, what I'm about to tell you will also kind of give you an idea that all those framings don't even really matter that much. Because we, for a while now, had this 30-day severance clauses. So 30-day severance clauses are your team can get rid of you and pay you a minimum amount of 30 days of your annualized salary. Okay? You can negotiate this to be a higher number. You can go 60 days, you can gain 90 days, and whatnot. The only way to get rid of you without paying you that is if you are in breach of your contract in some way. Like you breached some contract clause, or you retire, for instance, and you pull your retirement clause or whatnot, right? Mm-hmm. Now, why this is important is the following. And I expect this, and I tell you that a lot of general managers also expect this to happen. For some players, they are either on existing contracts, on high existing contracts that didn't need to be triggered, or had their options exercised, with the host team having very little intention of ever actually keeping these players around, and just having them go out as a possibility to recoup some of their losses. Because the 30-day severance, is not as big of a deal as the buyout that you could theoretically get from other teams that wanted to get the jump on the player. Also, of course, you're never going to communicate your strategies if you're smart. Okay. I think what is public is, for instance, that Charong is on a 2+1, I think. Even if he's not, right? Like I think he's currently still with the Defiant. Theoretically speaking, there's no reason why I would disclose as the Defiant what my strategy is for next year, correct? Because if I communicate my strategy, then that sets a little bit of the buyout clause. The cost for me that the other team has to presume that I want for you getting Charong, because I'm technically still valuing him as a player, is different when the assumption is that will let him go anyway.
Okay, I got to raise my hand.
Right.
because I think I understand the point, but I also don't think this like makes much sense in the market, and I have to like
Okay, go
ask
ahead.
for your opinion.
Sure.
Where it's like if I'm understanding what you're saying correctly, and teams are exercising options for players they have little to no intent on keeping, just to try to like bait people into buying them
Mhm.
in a market where we're also saying budgets are restricted.
Yeah. It will
How does that
work
make
for
any sense?
it makes sense for if you believe there are still a couple of orcs out there that have good budgets, which is probably true.
So you're aiming at whales.
Yes.
You are basically becoming Genshin Impact.
You're
Okay, very good. All right, just
whale
making sure we're
chasing.
clear.
You're also probably in some way
Uh-huh.
in the sunk cost fallacy. You probably paid a lot of buyouts for these players in the first place, and you don't quite want to realize yet that you probably lost all that money.
That's nuts to me.
Right? It could be rational. I'm not sure. Maybe you are still looking, like, if nobody gives you any money for one of your top players, maybe you're just like, oh, dude, like, no, that's too much money that we would have wasted on the buyouts. Maybe bring it back, you know? And
I guess,
well,
but
by the way,
that like
I shouldn't, like, I'm not saying, I just picked out a random example, but like,
sure.
everyone seems to be apparently doing this. Interestingly, actually, I'll give you an example of the Toronto Defiant saying exactly that as a part of the defense for them, because their owner, Adam Adamu, I'm not sure if you would say owner, but that's the owner level, was on their Discord saying that currently only Kevster and Proper are the only set players currently in the league. Those are the non-negotiables. Like, if you go to Glads and say, I want Kevster, they laugh at
like,
you.
You can't.
And if you go to Shock, you ask for Proper. Apparently, everyone else is on the mark. Now, if it's literally everyone else, you know, if Adam has talked to Hangzhou about Shy or, you know,
Sure.
Alpha Yi or whatever, I'm not sure. I'm probably not, right? But
is that surprising though that everybody's on the market? Like, is that wild, or is that like a bad
it's
thing?
wild as shit.
Really?
It's
I don't think that that's like a crazy thing to like have an option for everybody, or if like everybody has a price. Like, I think even going into the off season, I was like, I wouldn't be like flabbergasted if Shock was like, you know what, this is gonna seem kind of pants on head of us, but like, if you want to throw me 6 million for Proper, we'll hear you out. Like, we'll tease out the deal, right? Because like, I don't know if you're ever going to like get a hotter iron than sweeping the awards, getting the MVP, literally almost like hard carrying a team to a third title. Like, that's nuts to me. It also isn't like surprising that they would want to keep him and make him like a hands off type of player, but it does not surprise me that almost everybody in the league is like up for grabs or like has a price tag on them. Like, that doesn't.
I mean, maybe it's not surprising to you, but it can't feel great either, because like, imagine if we really just go like shaky, shaky, shake. Who has the most play chips? Let's reassemble everything. All storylines are dead.
Yeah, no. I understand that there is like problems. There's inherent problems with like incredibly tumultuous off seasons like the one that we're going through in terms of like a narrative building standpoint, a content building. Like, it is not a good thing, but it's not to circle back to my other point. It's not surprising to me that when teams are building with restricted budgets and only further getting restricted on a game that they literally could not play, everybody's going to have a tag. Nobody has a firm identity. You have teams literally like the NYXL, which we'll get into like some of these teams in particular, like ejecting and redefining maybe what even their team's going to look like for the next season. Like, it doesn't surprise me that everybody has a price tag. People are willing to like shift gears because we have information. We have a better idea. We also don't have a better idea of what's going on with the internals because we don't know with what you're communicating. There is not a very clear, pipeline of information. I think that's what's to be concerned about. I think having everybody just with a price tag on them, to me, doesn't communicate too much of an intent.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just me personally. I feel like there was so much malleable coming into this season that it's really hard to like. It doesn't shock me that like the two like all-star superstar level players are, Kesser and Proper, and they're the only ones that are like set in stone, and everybody else is like, And I feel like this again, like it
Keep
comes
in mind,
into like.
by the way, just to quickly, because people will say, "Oh, what the fuck is Hastro doing? Why is he not locking Hanbin? Also, MVP candidate. Hanbin's contract is expired, so
Yeah.
Right, like that would probably make at least a trifecta of like sick players that would be in there.
Sure.
Also, I think Adam's comment probably didn't also include APAC. I would say like he probably didn't ask Zol for profit or whatever. Yeah. But like it's pretty interesting. Like that just communicates. You could go to Outlaws and ask for Dante. You could.
Yeah.
You could go to who else has like franchise players? I guess Space is gone now anyway for Glads.
Sure.
Even though it's
well, when you're telling me that like teams are having a hard time making money, like yeah, of course, like everybody's gonna have like, are you gonna have to pay like an absorbent like pants on head amount? Probably. And that's where like the definition of a price tag comes in. It's like, okay, what's feasible? I feel like every time I hear about a buyout in this league, feasibility really doesn't seem to like strike out as like, oh yeah, that seems like a good price to pay for like a player that probably is only going to get worse in a game that we have no idea what to do with.
You hear it probably only in the nuts cases, right? Like a lot of folks have more reasonable buyouts, right?
I think most I don't even know if I agree with that. I don't know, without getting into too deep into the weeds there. That's getting into some spicy territory that I don't know. That might have to go into the after hours show. But yeah, I don't know. To me, it's not, doesn't shock me that in a league that is struggling to make money, that like everybody's up for grabs. And I would guess most of the big like franchise names like aren't actually going anywhere, but like they'll hear out if you want to pay $500,000 for Dante, right? Like they'll hear out if you want to pay $300,000 for Punk, right? Like, granted, I think Punk's contract is what is it? Is it expired? But they're communicating with him or something like that.
I'm not sure what the situation in Boston is.
I think they posted it, but whatever. So with that kind of preamble out of the way, I know I didn't mean to completely derail what you're saying with the contract stipulations and whatnot. Is there anything more that you wanted to get into there? Or do you want to dive into the construction rules?
I mean, we can get into his construction rules. I guess the thing that I'd like people to take away from here is that if you're confused by this, you're not on your own.
Sure, most people are.
There's players confused. By the way, if you're a player and by chance you listen to this and you have any questions and you don't have an agent that you could ask, you can shoot me a DM. Lord knows a lot of players have done this already. Like I'll never have to disclose that we talked or whatever. But it's also confusing for general managers. It's also like you can imagine we are in a competitive situation where you don't want to necessarily disclose. Actually, like, fair play to all the orgs that have disclosed what their current contract situation is, right? You wouldn't necessarily always want that. I'm not sure if you have to internally also absolutely do this. Also, by the way, fair play to the orgs actually coordinating when they're releasing. There seems to be some schedule. I don't know that, but implicitly just looking at the trickle of how news are coming in. Also keep that energy up for the announcements. But I think also there's like having a third party tell you, is this player actually LFT? Or because there's different ways you approach a player that's really not in a team or is signed to a team, because you cannot, there's tampering. You cannot directly talk to a player that's currently signed to an Overwatch League contract, unless given the permission by the team, which I suppose if you are posting LFT, my team has allowed me, communicates that happens. But yeah, generally speaking, and at the same time, like, I guess just ask and then ask for forgiveness later worked enough in the last off season.
Yeah. I think that's just something to kind of live life by in most cases. But continue.
Yeah. Yeah, generally speaking, like if this is confusing, yes, it's confusing for everyone. Yes, the specific verbiage that your player has posted might clue you in, and it's not confusing for literally everyone. Some did a good job explaining the implicit language there, but not just by the contract status rules, which, by the way, this article this year, the contract status article. So each year we get two articles.
We get the construction rules and then the contract status.
And the contract status, right? The contract status usually comes out sometime after the teams had to declare options. Options had to be declared by last Friday, so presumably we're getting that one early. But the roster construction rules are usually out the week before the grand finals, and this time we got it after the grand finals.
Much later.
So we might be delayed anyway, right? But I will tell you one thing, the contract status thing, because of the 30 days, will not give you great value this year.
Sure.
Because a lot of teams, at least right now, and once again, this might change once they are confronted with realities of who goes where, have picked up options of players that they don't intend to play with in Season 6. And therefore, like, if your player has been extended, it doesn't necessarily mean that he isn't just being trade baited in terms of getting a buyout back, or that they won't be dropped if that buyout won't be paid and they just eat the 30-day severance, and that player will be on the market later, which, especially for mid-tier players, is a problem. It is a problem. You kind of rely on your general manager to have a good feeling for the market value of their player, because a mid player that gets dropped too late, that's the difference between playing in the league next year or not.
Yeah, that's like a I dare I use a sports terminology that I'm not familiar with, but like that's effectively killing somebody's season, right? Like if you just sit on a player you don't actually intend to play in the hopes that you can recoup any kind of monetary value, and then you can't actually find a suitor, and then you just drop them because you couldn't find a suitor to recoup the monetary value because you're a head ass. I have no love for you in my heart. You are actively fucking around with, young adults, dreams and hopes.
Yeah.
For your own ventures. Like, I'm sorry, you deserve to be, named and shamed. Like, that's pretty messed up.
And it's not like if you have reasonable expectations that you should, like, if you put, let's just wild name once again. If you put a Pelican on the market, you expect a buyout. That's reasonable of you. You're in your right to do that, right?
Yes.
If you're putting an Although out and you want to, or let's say even a Punk, or even
I was gonna stick with the Houston, but whatever.
Yeah. Then that's a different idea. But just to, once again, we're not saying that this is true for those organizations.
No. Just using names as examples.
I actually specifically picked organizations where I don't expect this to happen, just to give you a rough idea. Hopefully you can see the mechanism there as to what is responsible ownership and what isn't. And I trust the organizations named to be able to do that. Roster construction rules?
Let's get into this, because I feel like it feels like it's very short this year, but also it kind of clues us in on what's going on, right? I don't know if you want to go through all of these dates, but there are some big ones that I feel like are definitely worth underlining, especially looking at today's date. So obviously November 4th, grand finals, end of the season, big poggers, great job. Day after, November 5th, teams submitting player trades, office review, all trades subject to blah, blah, blah. We are, typical jargon, teams may also continue working or extending otherwise signing their current players to standard contracts. Again, that doesn't. There's nothing shocking has been said thus
Okay,
far, right?
okay. I actually here I gotta. Maybe this is even an Eric question as well, or to you. What does trades mean? Because it doesn't mean free agents, right?
No,
it means trades.
You can't trade a free agent.
So theoretically speaking, we could have seen, a creative for Iris trade. That was a player trade. That could have happened. I will say historically, there have very few have happened. But
yes,
these could already have. So your team could have already gotten someone else in, right?
Sure. Let me pose this to you regarding trades, because I wanted to kind of throw this at you earlier. With everything that we've said kind of in a meta sense about this upcoming season or the state of the Overwatch League, do you think there is an increase in trades or just a typical like apathy towards them? Because I feel like it is very exciting to see trades in traditional sports, or at least in esports as a whole, and you don't tend to see them in the latter. And I have suspicions as to why that is, but I'm interested. Obviously, you're a little bit more nose to the ground with contracts and teams goings ons. Is there an increase this season, do you think, or just
no? And also,
typical?
like Eric pointed out something that's probably important to note. It could be a cash for player trade. So theoretically speaking, someone signed in the limbo state between like being having the option not exercised and still being on the team. They could have been traded in that window. I'm not aware of any of that happening, which is kind of peculiar, because if teams all rigorously did that, then we would be out of a lot of mumbo jumbo right now. But presumably, of course, you'd then have to pay a buyout, and I think everyone kind of wants to see what the eventual FA market looks like before you really invest any money. So it wasn't going to be likely that this is a thing, other than if you are a team that has a lot of play money and wants to be an early mover on like a ridiculous player, then you probably want to beat out before other teams get certainty about the FA market. That's just about the only situation. Historically, maybe it has happened. I'm not aware of it, because the announcement would presumably be slower. But yeah, I can tell you right now, I'm not aware of a contract having been signed. And the FA contracts, once again, like no player that's currently in FA can even have signed a contract with an Overwatch League team, because, and this is a future date, November 19th is when that is allowed.
Correct. Yes. That's when the teams may be signing free agents to contracts for the 2023 season. But I'm not going to sit here and read them all out. If you're interested in this stuff, definitely check it out. It's on the Overwatch League website. But I feel like the two big bullet points, at least for me, and Yiska probably has some that I haven't necessarily reflected well on, is the deadline for all teams to have a minimum of 5 players signed to a season-long contract being January 16th, which is only literally 2 months away from today as of recording this.
Right.
And March 1st, 2023 being the deadline for all teams to have a minimum of 6 players signed to season-long contracts. And I feel like that's and maybe Eric can correct me, but I feel like that's the first time we've seen like a 2-step minimum.
No, that has always been the case.
Okay, that's always been the case. Interesting. Okay.
Not sure if always, but definitely last year.
Last year. Okay.
Gotcha. I will say the dates are also very similar, which is interesting, because presumably we're starting earlier this year. We had this Washington Post thing that said May, and then Washington Post had to run that back and say, okay, probably earlier. I can tell you by my sources, it's probably also going to be earlier than May, for sure.
Sure.
But the deadline being March 1st is also later than I expected, to be honest.
Okay.
So it's the same as last year. So
gotcha.
That should tell you it doesn't necessarily communicate a deadline or a start date. The only thing that I mean, theoretically speaking, the league could start before that. Of course, that's unlikely, right?
That would be bonkers.
Like you could start this season with 5 players if you wanted to, I guess.
Sure, I guess you could, but
that's not likely.
What
right?
this does communicate is like if Washington Post is coming out saying, "Oh, it's May," and then they have to retract and say, "Okay, it's actually going to be a little earlier. We don't know." And we get March, and you're saying, this even feels a little early. At least we have like a better window of like when a start time could be.
Right. So
it narrows that down.
I would expect a March date is probably like that's
like a late
my
March.
best educated guess based on the officially communicated timelines without juicing anything into that. Just letting my pattern recognition work a little here. And if I find out, you'll find out. Right. Now, of course, once again, the 5-man window is interesting because that also, I mean, by that time you don't necessarily need to know who's been signed, right? That doesn't mean that this has to be communicated, even though a lot of teams will probably have a better roster.
Communicate within.
I think most teams probably want to have everything figured out before Christmas. That's a rule of thumb that you can probably apply here. I hope so as well, just for my, personal mental health. But
sure.
Yeah, I think this is once again a very nothing extraordinary in these types of situations, very normal in terms of the timelines we've had in comparison. They also worked pretty well, and I think the in general how this worked around scheduling. I'm a big fan of the Run It Back Cup being sort of like in that window where you still can get a look at the contenders players while those signing windows are relatively open, especially contenders Korea stuff. That's dope just because now I get to watch currently O2 pop off on some teams and you don't know where those players are going yet, right? Like keep in mind O2 dude, Merit, right? Proper. Those are Chio, Pelican. Those are the guys that
that shapes the season. That's your future rookie of the year. How many rookie of the years and MVPs have come out of O2?
Yeah.
Right? It feels like they just produce award-winning players. So it's yes, this is the time to get ahead of the fandom and be big smart and look at your friends and be like, I told you this quarterback out of Auburn is crazy, and then he is sports ball, fucking make it up. The other kind of interesting
that popped me the Run It Back. Yeah.
Agreed. You definitely want to put that, in that window so that everybody has a good chance, especially the teams, to kind of see them, prove themselves and maybe earn a contract, right?
Yeah.
The other interesting point that I know that you were very excited about comes in one of these blocky paragraphs. I'm going to start here. If a team has at least, I'll quote this quote, if a team has at least 6 players signed to season-long contracts, they may sign additional players to 30-day contracts. Upon expiration of a 30-day contract, a player becomes a free agent who may negotiate with other teams. Teams do not have the option to extend a 30-day contracts unilaterally. End quote. That is new, correct?
No,
that last part.
No, that's not. The next sentence is new.
Oh, new for 2023. Teams may only sign given player to a 30-day contract once per season. Okay.
Right.
I felt like the yes, that is new. It starts with the sentence. It literally starts with new, but I felt like the unilaterally was the rolling 30 days. No?
Yeah, that wasn't the rolling 30 days. We initially, me being German pilled, also thought okay, the unilaterally meant that last time, because when I found out about rolling 30 days, the concept I'm about to explain, last time I read unilaterally and went oh yeah, that doesn't actually prohibit it. What that unilaterally means is you cannot force a player to sign the next 30-day.
Gotcha.
Okay. Now, this is sort of as in, or unilaterally, you sign a 30-day and then you say, yeah, you can force them to sign a 1-year contract. That doesn't work, right? What is new this season, what doesn't work, and I can tell you, fuck it, I'm going to just name and shame the team.
Okay.
The team that definitely did it last year was the Valiant.
Sure.
They had rolling 30-day contracts. Okay. What are rolling 30 days? Rolling 30 days are, I sign a player to a 30-day contract, and then upon that 30-day contract expiring, I sign them to another 30-day contract. And I keep that going for the duration that I need them, in order to avoid, for instance, having to sign them in the for the preseason. Like, I don't have to necessarily pay them then, right?
Right.
Theoretically speaking, I could, and there, I don't want to say that the Valiant did that, but that would be the logical next step for them, is to not sign the player whose hero pool is currently not in meta, but tell them, keep your meta heroes sharp. I will sign you again when the meta hits. If it doesn't, tough luck. And then, worse yet, you're, as that 30-day player, might not even be attractive for the market because your coach has you practicing some weird hero telling you like you're going to get picked up, which the market actually doesn't need. So it was literally like the most nefarious shit you could do to a player at the lower end of, skill level of in the league, right? So... like it just caused this rolling effect of minimizing what you had to pay. So for instance, like the situation where players wanted to pool money,
fund Marvel
in order to fund Marvel. That was for 30-day, right? Initially, I think in the end, I don't want to necessarily go on record. I think he got a full season contract. I'm not sure if he was one of the rolling ones. There were definitely players that were starters that were on rolling 30 days, though.
Sure.
And that's bonkers, right?
And that is prohibited now going into 2023.
Correct.
You're only able to sign a given player to a single 30-day contract once per season, thus kind of minimizing the mercenary for hire strategy that it sounds like Valiant were imploring last season.
Yeah.
Outside of that, is there anything else that kind of strikes your fancy with the 2023 roster construction rules, or should we actually get into some contract statuses?
We can for sure. I will say, good one for the league. I think it's probably impossible to change this mid-flight, but good on them for having gotten rid of that exploitative strategy, because you probably have a good idea that salaries are not necessarily going to increase. They probably didn't last season, but you also definitely want to raise the salary floor, and as in like the minimum that a player can expect to play in your league. Because, come on, like if someone makes it, it gotta be worth a little bit. And yes, the 30-day contracts are like, the intention of the rule was noble and good, which is to fill those holes where unforeseen shit happens, especially in a COVID situation, especially like when the roster budgets are not as big that you can always have like, the 12-man roster staff. If players get sick, whatnot, right? Like these 30 days then serve a real purpose. Unfortunately, we can't have nice things because, of course, people will exploit.
Somebody's going to abuse it,
right? Yeah. So for you to change your rule sets there, I'd like to keep that energy and clamp down on a couple of other practices that have some similar exploitative potential. Just assume at this point, like we're past a goodwill. Era.
We live in a post goodwill world.
We're now squeezing, and I can understand why teams are squeezing. I'm also not faulting you for that, but rules need to reflect the realities and need to set boundaries for which all parties can be sort of okay with.
Agreed. So, jumping into some contracts here, I think some of there's definitely some that we understand, we probably want to get to, looking at the Spark, but with the how to say this, with the rumor mill churning about as it does, it's probably best that we leave some for later, leaving them time to marinate, let's say. So first jumping in with the shock. The shock, let's see, the date was November 11th. Bid farewell to Striker, Kaluge, Sam, and Mikey. Does any of these names surprise you? Because it sure didn't for me.
Oh, me when we soft league another Overwatch League roster move before it happens and nobody realizes.
Did we? That one I didn't catch.
Yeah, last time I said get rid of some of these American players.
I mean, it makes perfect sense. I will forever raise a pom pom for Krusty and his dream of thinking that some of these project players are going to work out, and I think Kaluge has definitely some legs under him. But I think it's just high time that Shock just becomes a fully Korean team and they stop mucking around. It's kind of wild to me.
It's still not impossible that they won't, but like
no, it's definitely not on the table. No, we've seen Krusty do weirder things. Looking at you, Tayo, but I think for me at least. I hope this signals intent, because the only players, at least currently, as of recording of the 16th of November, they have Violet, Finn, Kilo, and Proper under contract. Kilo, I'm a little eyebrow raisy about. But another one that was not in this Twitter post is that assistant coach Kasoris has left. Has actually joined the Toronto Defiant. We'll get to them. But yeah, anything here that kind of surprises you? Does this like the Striker pickup and release? Like, is that weird? Do you think that he has legs to sign to another team in the off season? I feel like that's like a pretty big name that also could warrant more attention.
It was a little bit surprising, but not as much in the manner which we saw him come in, right? Like, he filled a role. He did so admirably. But I think, like, with the writing on the wall, what kind of O2 players are going to, go in the direction of the Shock, as we might expect. It's not impossible that, you got everything that Striker could offer you covered already. So
getting into well, I guess we'll save that. Is there really anything more to say about the Shock? Is there anything, do you just think that the O2 players are just getting automatically promoted? Is there anybody else on the free agent market that you feel like Shock could necessarily nab? I think last week Kenobi? I think last week was Kenobi. Time dilation. I feel like, go ahead.
Here's the interesting one is, as far as I know, Kilo isn't released, right?
Correct. Yes, he's still signed.
That's surprising to me.
Yes, that definitely raises my eyebrow. Is this one of those, like, you're trying to bait people into getting a buyout for him? Because I was not impressed. Like, looking at the season as a whole, I think he had his stages. But a season as a whole, I was not impressed with Kilo, and I feel like they could definitely do better. I don't think that's, like, crazy to say.
Yeah, I think,
or he's just a role player.
That's probably also something that I've heard a lot, like that it was just a hard year. Like, if there are circumstances in this season that are extraordinary.
Sure.
I would not, and I'm not saying, okay, let me give you an example, and I'm not sure if that applies to Kilo. But I think the stonks of players that are hard grinders and get their skill from hard grind is necessarily going to get up with ranked around, right? So agreed. I think we'll see some reevaluation necessarily through the competitive, ecosystem switching. I think this year you could actually get away with practicing less, even though many didn't.
Sure.
Many just went hard on Overwatch 1 ranked, as bad as that was.
Just try to keep up as best you can.
Yeah,
agreed.
But you also understand that isn't as effective as practicing actually thing is. So, I think there's especially someone like Kilo that we all expected to do a little bit better than he ended up doing.
Definitely.
I think that I'm not opposed. I'm not sure if I would do it on the shock. There, I expected to, my bad.
Bless you.
Thank you. I expected maybe them to maybe find another role player, maybe even keep Striker, considering Striker was already the replacement there, and then fill up with Hisang and be done with it. But I'm not sure. But like they probably have a good reason, and
Sure.
maybe he will be let go. I don't actually like. There's a lot of ways, but it's interesting that he wasn't one of the players mentioned while Striker was. That was surprising to me.
All right. Next up on the docket, we have the Boston Uprising, who, credit to Pre coming in as GM. I think he's definitely already done an admirable job. Admirable. About, kind of publishing.
I pilled you. I German pilled you. I said the word.
You did slip it in there.
When I said the word, I already knew I said it wrong, and now you copied me. When I'm Yiska pilled.
You are. I would hope that you're pilled with yourself. Boston publishing both their options, their contract statuses, but also giving a little jab at the league and trying to force some change, lighting a fire. Definitely. Well, you'll never not hear me raise a toast to that. So good on you. Love that. So. This one's a little fishy because I feel like it does a good job of skirting both being a good GM, both being strategical, but also like trying to mask as best you can of what your strategy necessarily is, but also like maybe even communicating that the strategy is still up in the air. So Punk's contract is expired. Valentine's contract expired. Mag's contract was there. His option was actually declined, which I find very interesting. Victoria's option was declined. Crimso's option declined. Seeker's option declined. Faith, MCD, it's all declined. However, the more interesting thing to note is that Pre also, I think, later states that Punk, Valentine, Mag, Victoria, Crimso, Seeker all are still in communications with Boston, and they're possibly working out a deal, maybe. This is another massacre. This is another big one to kind of toss up in the air. I feel like
that. But by the way, this already, if you decline an option and then still are in communication with that player, for what reason, right?
No.
I mean, okay, not to. I mean, one of the bigger reasons is that you don't want to pay them at the salary that you were paying them in the old contract.
Sure, yeah.
Right? The other thing is maybe you actually want to see what the market is and don't want to be absolutely locked in.
Tied in.
But at the same time, then you would just extend and then fire them at the 30-day severance, and it's not that big of a loss, right?
Agreed.
So, yeah.
Another thing to kind of note here as well, in kind of branching off from what you're saying, Boston doesn't have a coach, right? I feel like I've definitely been a big proponent, at least for me personally, of giving coaches first reign on what rosters they should be. They should have complete control and autonomy over the rosters that they field, right? If Pre was to come in and sign somebody or extend a contract or activate an option and then kind of slap a coach on top of that, that already makes me a little uneasy when it comes to roster building just ad hoc. So it's I appreciate that there are still optionality. Obviously, a lot of these players still have a lot of years in them. Let's say they're still able to play. I'm still of the opinion that I think Mag deserves to be a starter on a team. I think he definitely still can play. I think Punk probably deserves to be a franchise player for a team. Is it the Boston Uprising? We'll have to see. But is there any player here that you're kind of eyeing and feel like could go somewhere? Is there anybody that you're kind of, I don't think any of these names are shocking when you see them, declined, because again, Boston's management is being reworked. So again, you probably want to give, this coaching staff first dibs on who they play. But anything here?
No, I think that's probably a smart strategy to. If
Really?
I'm coming in as a general manager, after that year that Boston had, I'm tabula rasa all the way, dude. Like,
Agreed. Agreed 100%. I think this is again a step in the right direction for Boston. I think they've everything that I've heard about Boston has really been nothing but really, really positive, and I think that kind of, at least for me, um, is very strange to hear because I feel like I still have like the bad taste in my mouth from like seasons past, where it's like, oh, things aren't necessarily going well, things are a little like turmoily, but everything that I've heard out of recent Boston has been, quite peaches and cream. So again, starting off on a really good foot. Hopefully, Boston can get together and be the playoff team that we kind of hope for. Moving into APAC here for a second, the Shanghai Dragons are 2021 champions. Also, kind of set the template for some of these contract infographics. So diving into this for a moment, Void's contract is expired, so he'll be possibly on the market. I know that there's rumors going around that he possibly may be going and doing his compulsory military service. So we'll have to see on that. Fate, however, had his option declined. Fleta expired. Lip still under contract, which super exciting for them going into 2023, especially with his performance this year. Who Are You? His contract expired. Lee Jae-gon is still under team option, which I have to assume because they don't make the designation between like team option and team option declined, that them just listing team option means they activated the option. So Lee Jae-gon and Izayaki had their options triggered, where Bebe shockingly had his option declined. Is there anything there? For me, I feel like Fate was kind of interesting, but anything there that tickles your fancy?
no, not really. Fate is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's also a bunch of like high caliber players. I mean, if everyone's on the market, there's definitely like 4 players that I would at this point have to say I'd want to build my new legacy on. Like if I'm Shanghai Dragons, I'm going like, but yeah, yes, I would like someone, please.
That's you kind of read my mind, and I feel like this is what I was referring to about last episode, was that I feel like if you are crusty and you still want to play with a mixed roster and you still want to have a world-class lineup, there is probably not a better single tank player you could throw money at than trying to secure someone from the mayhem. In that same vein, if you're world class, legend of a flex tank has his contract expire, and he's also maybe teasing out the idea that he may retire for the foreseeable future, and you're not necessarily signing one of the quietly best tank players of all time in Fate. Is this not open up like a weird potential like bidding war between Shanghai and Shock to try and just throw the bag at Florida?
I mean, Shock has max, right?
Sure.
So,
but again, if you want to still run mixed, which Crashly has done,
yeah, I'm not sure if they would this year, but we'll see. Maybe that's a possibility. You just require better tank prospect too, bro. Yeah. I don't think Shock is the team that to give you action. I think there are a lot of other teams that potentially might. If I'm
like a Glads,
Glads, maybe even a Houston, unless I
there's no shot. There's no way Houston is paying money. I refuse. I feel like that is not on the table in the slightest. That would be wild to me. If the Houston Outlaws of Beasley Media is actively searching and willing to pay a buyout for somebody in today's market, that would be nuts to me.
I mean, they bought Pelican last year, right?
Yeah, but that's last year.
Yeah. I mean, not wrong. I don't know what their strategy is for them going.
That
forward,
would be. I mean, I feel like that is a +1 for me. Like if you're willing to do that and you're willing to invest, because it is a great investment. I'm not going to tell you not to. Yeah. But like, if you can afford that, do it. I don't know that they can. That's just my take on things.
Yeah, but yeah, like even okay, who else? Dallas wouldn't unless they. I mean, no, Hanben is gone.
Yeah.
Or Enfields is gone. But who is below that? I mean, honestly, like the upper half of the league would probably. If I'm a soul, I probably don't need it. Unless, like, if I keep Smurf, but there's not that many teams that I wouldn't say could you make use of someone. So, I also am a little scared for Shanghai here. Because honestly, I don't think there are that many A class, A tier, or S tier prospect main tanks on the market, unless you
for sure
wanna actually go ham.
But I feel like that's like most teams are gonna have to bite that bullet, and like most teams are not gonna be able to field just a single tank. I mean, literally Dallas couldn't, and they still won the championship. So I feel like that's still not like a bad thing.
That's fine, but even there, like the talent pool is thinning. Like you had two of the best Overwatch tanks, bar none, on your roster.
Agreed.
The same would be like I would say the same thing to Dallas if they were to lose both things.
Mm-hmm.
You got some problems, bro. Like, what are you going to do? Trust that Callan is actually better than he looks, and come like take a guess there.
We'll get to him, but
what do you do with like who else could you like? You can't go into any of the Western main tanks. I mean, I'm not trusting Muse with my championship aspiration. Who is there? Like, other than someone, other than Smurf, other than... It gets thin. There's not that many Korean-speaking main tanks that have a wide hero pool that I would say are Shanghai Dragons class.
Hear me out. This is fringe, but I feel like maybe Moon could do something with this player where it's like, okay, if you need a player to buy in, if you need a player to really, have an aspiratorial relationship, to aspire to maybe please a coach or to let a coach work with them, is there a world where somebody like a Mag plays that role fine enough? I'm not saying world class.
Oh, dude.
But like, if you need a main tank role player, which I think for a lot of teams is the cold reality, is your tank position is a role focused position. And no, I don't mean just the definition of like Overwatch role. I mean, you have your flex tank player and you have your main tank player, and like that's what they play. Just like how we're viewing hit scans these days, right? Like, is there room for Mag?
Maybe, but I wouldn't feel. I wouldn't feel good about it if I'm Shanghai Dragons.
Do you feel better about that than somebody like Muse?
About the same.
Okay, yeah, I would agree. But that's kind of where I'm at with it, where it's like, okay, I'm not necessarily super well versed on like the upcoming like Korean tank scene, but with like the free agents that we have on the table, it's like, okay, I can either try to like get in discussions with Dallas, right? Or I'm looking at Muse, I'm looking at, Mag, I'm looking at...
That's where I was going with this.
So you think like Dallas and Shanghai trade players?
I mean, like, basically, all of this was probing to go like... I'm not sure, like, I have no insight into the Eastern...
Would make sense, though.
Into the Eastern, budgetary concerns or whatnot. I'm sure this hasn't been easy for them either. But yes, like Dallas tanks are the premier sources for them if you don't unless you want to get someone.
Sure.
And once again, Hanbin is a FA. Right? He's not.
He is, but I again, and as much as like You want to. I think people throw around money in a very like lackadaisical way when it comes to like these arguments, because I feel like a lot of the time, I think we're so over. I think a lot of these players are so over money at this point because there's literally not enough to like make them like flip the switch and be like, you know what, I'm going there. Like, I don't think we have that kind of like fuck you money right now. But what we do have is a championship core. What we do have is a coaching staff that can work with you and that like you can communicate with, right? I feel like if there was ever a lock, it's probably Hanbin for Dallas, but Fearless, I don't know his contract status, but I have to assume maybe that would be where maybe Shanghai can snag one. I don't know. We'll see. Also, he's worked with Moon before, so.
Who would you rather take, Hanbin or Fearless?
I would pay hand over fist for Hanbin, but I don't know that they have that kind of money.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I don't know if you have.
I mean,
that
it's
kind
just
of money
the salary,
like,
right? It's just the salary. You just have to pay the salary. Maybe you give him some sign-off bonus. I think.
But is that enough to pull you away from the team that you literally just won a championship with?
Maybe you want to have a new challenge once you just won a championship.
Possibly, certainly possible.
Right?
I'll hear that.
That's a possibility. I'm not sure about the relationship there with Rush. Keep in mind, I think as far as I know, Rush has also been allowed to explore options, right? So, like, you could go somewhere as a package deal for all you know.
Yeah. Owl loves their package deals. Let me tell you.
So, I mean, that's a big chungus on the market. But
you just call Hanbin and Rush a big chungus.
Yes, yeah, that's exactly what I did. But yeah, I think it's an interesting situation because, like, if you have infinite money, you can actually become the emperor of the universe this season. I feel there are so many superstars. Keep in mind, you don't have a.
Oh, you're gonna love this take.
Okay,
continue.
Go on.
All right. Because I agree, and you've kind of alluded to this publicly as well, that like there are going to be some teams that like want to invest, have the capital to invest, and will invest into like having a competitive roster with like just revenue or not revenue, but like just pure money. Like they're going to continue to throw money at this. I feel like there is going to be a humongous underperformance from one of those teams, and I don't think that that's like crazy to say. Is that like a hot take? I feel like what you're spelling out to me, the emperor of the universe, if you have infinite money, you make a super team. I feel like there is going to be a team that's going to be viewed as a super team coming into this seat, in 3 or 4 months time, when we get closer to the start of the season, there's going to be a team that looks like a super team. It's going to be a team that historically has thrown money around. And they're going to shit their pants live on stage. Mark my words.
I mean, I feel like that's very Hangzhou Spark-pilled of you. But yeah, I don't think that's a particular hot take. I think there's a lot of teams that in the past have done so. And
would agree.
I think, yes, there's a possibility. There's also a high possibility that some team just buys a championship to a degree, right?
That's going to be hard for me to buy in on, but I think to buy a championship, that one's tough for me to buy.
I feel like Dallas did.
Did they buy a championship?
I don't think they bought a championship in 2021, yeah. Like they got
a championship on lease.
They saw like the success of Paris. They went like,
yeah, that's not buying a championship. That's just recognizing success and using that core to build off on, and then you build into
you get
a
your core and win. Easy.
Yeah.
Easy.
They didn't win though. I feel like the definition of buying a championship is a little bit different. I feel like if you just sign a team and then win a championship, I feel like, okay, yeah, you bought a championship. So if the Vancouver Titans of 2020, yes. Yeah. If the Titans literally won the championship, okay, you bought a championship. Great job. Like, well done with your roster building. You really tried hard. But also, you didn't have to try very hard because it was pretty obvious, at least to the people who knew. That said, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. The offseason is still very young. Moving on from Shanghai.
Okay, can I really quickly? Here's my definition. Are you are you buying a system or are you buying players to assist the system? That's my definitional difference. Because we know the most successful coaches in Overwatch League, they have systems, they have funnels that bring stuff into your team.
Sure.
Dallas had zero funnel. Like Rush established the
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
the funnel for them. Krusty has the funnel and has had for several seasons with O2
Prior to like the O2
and like having his feelers in Korean contenders. There's the funnel of Moon, of course, always having his past players, but also keeping tabs on a couple of guys. Like these are hard-earned systems, and if like it's not, I'm not saying that Dallas didn't try to build funnels with their contenders team and whatnot. They just weren't fruitful. So you buy a better system, and then you bring those in. I think, in my mind, also no discernible method. I guess, like you could say, a little bit of a departure last year in terms of. Sephi has a system, of course, with ATL Academy. I don't think Glads had ever had one to that degree. Like what? Like their funnel was getting Panker. Was it Panker?
They had Panker and Water, and they had some other like role players, but
the tiniest funnel was Patty Pan from the face connection, right? So that's basically in my mind, like it's a little hyperbolized, buying a championship. I'm saying they bought a system, it bore fruit, right? Like they didn't put the seed of the apple tree into the ground. They bought an apple tree, and then next year they had apples.
Yes, agreed. And to that, I can say that yes, Dallas bought their championship on lease. They got a rain check, an IOU perhaps. But moving on, this will be a quick one. I really don't know if there's much to say here, but New York doesn't have a team anymore. They're all gone. Everybody is off. Nobody signed. Everybody's gone. Thoughts?
I'm so close.
What do we do with this team? What do we do with this team?
So close, Joe.
I'm still mad at you for trying to sell me on the feather stocks. I'm still not letting you live that down. Just throwing it out there.
I mean, that was a good player. Like, what can I say? Even Flora, like at times, Flora just showed like.
I'm a weirdly staunch Flora defender. I thought he had some definitely impressive performances, but yeah, this team kind of sucked poo poo. Big pee pee poo poo energy from this team.
There's a lot of sympathy in
a lot of simping
in me in what the NYXL has brought to the league. So they come into season 1, they're immediately the most dominant team. They are a very marketable team. They do great content.
Great.
Ultimately didn't win the league. Try second year.
Still pretty good.
Still pretty good, but
weirdly good.
Performances go down. Okay, you're probably also not seeing the financial returns that you want to see. You change routes. You keep changing. Like neither the competitive success follows or probably the revenue success. So you try different things. I have to question, like in recent years, like there's some it feels like the methodical planning has become less and less, and the erratic changes have become more and more. Just consider your moves going forward very wisely.
True.
I think this is a beloved brand in a great city that probably has one of the bigger endemic audiences.
Let me throw this at you. That kind of puts a weird hair up my butt. You talk about a beloved city. You talk about a brand that actually has been like weirdly successful. Is there a world where New York sells
the team to who?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's New York. Who doesn't want to be a piece of New York?
Look at this guy just saying this and then just walking it off like Molotov cocktail. Goodbye. Looked away from the explosion. Joe, people have tried to sell. There's nobody buying. Like that's
True.
not an option.
But has somebody tried to sell New York?
I don't know.
I feel like that's better than bumfuck Kansas.
Sure.
You know, it's like, where do I want to be? Do I want to be a competing Texas team, or do I want to be in New York City? Like, okay, well, now you're talking. Now you're speaking my language.
Sure. Nah, I don't know. Like, unless you get a good offer or whatever.
Sure, of course.
Like the next best thing that most teams are kind of doing, like, you know, they try to outsource their esports program and try to find more endemic solutions. You know, like,
so partner with somebody who's local to. I think. Granted, I don't like this option either.
They yeah. I don't know. Like, I'm just weirdly concerned for their moves going forward.
Yeah, I think it's weirdly concerning that you just eject your entire roster and starting over yet again. Like, yeah, of course it's concerning. We just came off a season where the biggest thing about the New York Excelsior was that they had too many flex supports. Right? Like, that was the notable thing about the team that literally had the player that some people wrongly assumed was like the faker of this game and was dominant throughout the first couple seasons and like this destructive powerhouse. And now they've become the retirement home for flex supports. It's like, yeah, something has to change. And you'll never not hear me, you know, whisper in the great words of trying to just go fully Western, and really leaning into that marketing value that, you know, they definitely can do.
That's Vulcan pilled of you.
That's what?
Vulcan pilled?
He got done dirty. I can't comment on Vulcan's skill as a player, but I feel like he got kind of thrown around a little bit. I feel bad for him.
Sure.
But yeah, I for me personally, I'd love to see the marketing arm of New York Excelsior approach a mid to low tier budget Western roster and really just make really try to elevate those players as best they can. I think that's a team that definitely has a future there, and I think that would be a long-term success plan, at least for me personally.
Yeah, it depends. Like, I think like having a loving roster that's in the middle position, like something like the London Spitfire, I think that was probably like generally speaking,
that's like lightning in a bottle.
As big a success as you could reasonably like. They're probably the most cost-effective. Also, just like in terms of like likability, even though I don't think they were that high in terms of followers. I'm not sure.
No,
like
not at all. And I still doubt they are. But
I mean, it's really hard to come up with salient solutions to a revenue problem, right?
Sure, but imploding a roster isn't helping you.
Yeah.
Signing 5 flex supports isn't helping you.
They actually went nutty, right? Like, it's not just that they got rid of everyone on that team in terms of the players. The staff is gone, right?
Yeah.
I'm not sure about Nugget if he's still there, but everyone else seems to be gone at this point. So yeah, it's a rough one. It's we'll see what's going to be going forward. Yeah,
New York not looking so hot. It's a weird one. Moving on to the Gladiators, also have put out a couple of contracts that they have. I believe this is the whole team, right? Yeah, whole team. Some of the contracts that have expired, options declined, and options have taken. So Reiner's, assuming if I'm reading this right, his 1-year contract without an option is expired. So if I'm understanding this correctly, he's an active free agent, which I think is very exciting. Space was declined. Kevster obviously taken. No shocker there. I think Happy being declined his option is a little interesting.
That's interesting. Yes, that surprised me. Yeah, I actually don't have the story there. That's something I'd love to find out from the spot.
That one's interesting. Shu being on the market with his contract being expired. That's very exciting. I think that's going to be
That's a big one. Yeah.
a choice piece that people are going to really want to be chasing after. Skewed, contract expired, and Funny Astro with his team option taken. So good for probably the world's best Lucio player to still have a team. So the Glads actively look like they're just Astro and Kevzer, which I think is a good base to build on. But anything here that kind of weird out? I know you said that Happy was a little
The Happy
funky,
one is
but
interesting. Like, I assume that's only possible if you have a good idea where you're going. I think like the interesting part is like also the entire American Tornado story, right? So
okay.
I think Ferris had all of those guys signed. That's an agent that has been active in the Overwatch community for a while. And they finagled that every one of those AT guys just has a 1-year contract. Right. Now, I'm not 100% sure what the idea here is. I think maybe they just try to get to go together to one team. The market didn't want them to be all in one team and play, so they said, okay, we'll negotiate 1-year deals and we'll try again next year once we've proven our talent. I'll also say, if you look at that AT roster, just to refresh your memory, and by the way, AT is a fluid thing because is our Redbird players ATs and whatnot. Like,
sure,
you know, like Reiner, probably, if not the best tank, one of the best tanks in the first half of the season.
Oh yeah.
Hydron definitely peaked nice and late in the postseason. The backline, Ultraviolet and OG, definitely had high points in the season. I would argue haven't actually shown their full potential in the league yet. Who am I forgetting? I'm forgetting a DPS player, an obvious one.
Speedily.
Okay, that's also an interesting one. Aspire technically, and then Sam, right?
Yeah.
Those guys, I mean, there were varying rosters and versions of it, but it seems like they have a plan, and they also, I would expect a couple of teams biting.
Yeah, I'd bite. If I was a GM, I'd definitely be interested in that package deal. I'm sure it's, you talk about buying a championship. That's a system that is proven to work. You just have to have somebody that can pilot it. And
okay, real talk. I don't think that's a championship winning roster.
No. It's definitely not a championship winning roster. But if you're talking about like buying a system, or if you're talking about buying like a history that does work, like this is a team that is proven to work together, that is proven to, at least get along for the most part, at least to,
you're buying a system, but it's not a self-replicating system, right?
Yeah.
Like if you buy Rush, then you buy something that propagates and like, goes through mitosis and gives you more great teams, right? If you buy American Tornado, you're buying those guys and those guys only. Maybe they attract other talent. That could be the case, but it's not like they're going to magically raise the new generation of talent, right? That being the difference. But I would be excited to see an Aspire version. I think Aspire is probably the most underrated player of those. I think Aspire had a 6 season last year. I think on a better roster, he could have been the best player of those AT players.
Maybe.
I think Reiner, of course, like especially like it seems like Reiner is a player that needs to vibe with the environment, and just being with friends that dominated Overwatch Overwatch contenders for the longest time, just because they kind of vibe with that. It's probably maybe conducive to that type of environment. So that would be interesting to see. Once again, I think Ultraviolet and OG, at least, I think for stage 1, they were pretty sweet. We'll have to see how that turns out. Of course, you could see them bringing in another flex support. Maybe there's someone from the Redbird crew in there that could also, add to that. Wouldn't surprise me to see them get offers as a unit this year, and for them to, in some iteration, join an organization on November 19th.
Mm. Yeah, I think there's definitely room for that to happen. It'll just be real interesting as to what that looks like and where, because, like you mentioned, it's a system that probably works. I don't know who I want heading it, but it's definitely an idea to kind of peruse around. Anything else with the Glads that is a little weird? Anything sussy there? You and I'm sussy?
No. I think reasonably, with the exception of Happy, they probably did what I would have expected or what was in their within their power to do. I think, of course, you take Kevster's option every day. I think you definitely also want hot take. I'm more than fine having Astro be my support line, even if I can only have 2 support players. I think Astro can absolutely play a break. I think Astro can absolutely be trusted to grind into like something like BAB. He just didn't have to, because like if you have the best break in the league on your team, you probably don't need to play that. So I'm less concerned about that there. Of course, I would probably expect them to, try to get that backline back. I think it was the best in the league with Dallas. I think that's fair to say that both the Dallas backline and the Glads backline were on eye level and were definitely like the best 2 backlines this year. Yep. Space declined makes sense to me. I think you want a new solution in the tank position that is all-encompassing. If you can help it, you want one guy. I'm a staunch believer that whatever Dallas pulled off there is bonkers crazy that it worked, but I wouldn't want to try to replicate it.
I still think we're a couple years out before like that solution is just readily accessible. With Overwatch 2 kind of, again, like just hitting the ground recently, players across the globe finally getting their hands on it and like grinding it out. I think it's probably going to take at least another season before we see a single take solution for all 20 teams be like an actual option to kind of tease out at like a high level. So I in a weird way, I agree that like you do want to aim for a single tank solution. I just don't know that there are like actual fits that meet that criteria all that well. I think a lot of teams are probably going to have to bite the bullet, run the 2, and just wait and see. If you can grab one, that's obviously what you should do. But I don't suspect that many teams are going to be able to. I just don't see. I don't see that a single tank future happening just yet. I think it is the future, but I think we're a little bit farther out.
Sure.
And agreed there with the supports. I think that's probably the first step. Is probably getting them back under contract. Whereas the tanks probably could go Happy. It's interesting. He didn't have the landing. I think he thought he didn't have the landing. I think we all thought he should have. But it wasn't bad. But we know how talented he is. We know how talented he can be. Coming in like halfway, 3/4 of the way, finish with the season. Obviously, it probably does something to you. So we'll see there. But yeah, final thoughts with Glads?
No. Interested to see. Definitely, if they have the money this year, they can buy a dynasty.
Could do. They definitely are one of those teams that I'm looking at to probably continue to spend. So we will see. Moving on to the Cinderella story of the season, the London Spitfire have also announced their contract status update. Backbone, Hattie, Admiral, and Landon all had their options exercised. So they will be coming back for the 2023 season. The coaching staff is already on a existing contract to entering year 2 of the existing contract. Both Commander X and Christopher be coming back for next year. Sparker, Shax, Poco, their contracts have been expired, and Khan's option was declined. So this one, actually, I feel like there is something to chew on here. I'll throw it to you. Where do you want to start?
I mean, I think the one thing that's out of, like, that's not expected is probably Khan's option declined over London's option exercised.
Right.
And that's probably something that nobody can evaluate better than the dudes that were there internally. I think, of course, also for Khan, kind of hard to get into such a tight-knit established unit.
Of course.
And especially like if you're entering a market where potentially a lot of free agents are available, then I would also, as a low budget team, probably decline. It's not like I expect everyone to just like have a run at Khan. And even if someone gets him instead of you, if you really needed to, then I would probably go elsewhere. Unfortunately, I could also see this team just going 6 players and done. And the 6 players you then wanted the DPS role instead. Now, everyone else expired. If they can't get Sparker back, that would be a huge loss. I think that would probably honestly change the team dynamic. You really would need like an A+ DPS like Sparker is in my mind to fill in that role. Otherwise, you're going to have huge problems replicating that success, even if you have the tightest of synergies. I think Sparker being so good was probably one of the biggest factors in their ability to upset so many teams this year.
Definitely. Go back to the Atlanta series.
Yes.
What if you run-ins with Atlanta where Sparker really was really a big factor in that, big impact player?
I think like Shax and Poco. Not just from a pure transfer perspective. Yeah, that makes sense. Those are like if you're cutting your fat, and also let's be honest, like I would never, after such a year, do nothing and just hope that I can do the same. Like everyone's upgrading. You're already a budget roster that underperformed. I'm not building on my synergy being even better next year. You need changes, and it's already an uphill battle for you with Sparker being gone, right? That's the one guy that you would have definitely wanted to have in there, right? So, I guess I'll straight up also tell you, okay, once again, I'm back. He's once again like hate-pilled. No, in all fairness, I don't think, other than team morale things and internal piecing, and you think you're probably not going to get better on the market anyway, I wonder if I would have extended Backbone.
That was my other point. It was like Khan and Backbone were the two like glaring like options. Like, okay, well that's interesting to see. When you talk about like kind of trimming out some of the players that I think Backbone had a fantastic season. Is that something that you can consistently see replicated? That I don't know. Yeah. I think you can say that he has a good hero. I think Christopher and this coaching staff trust him on a number of them, but when you look at his performance, both statistically and through the eye test, you compare it to the field, it's like there's got to be something there that we're not seeing that's not being translated, because it just doesn't look like something I'd want to keep.
Then again, like I feel like this kid had like a solo leveling type of elevation of skill this year, where I thought like he wasn't just only a May one trick that was probably not even S tier. He then became an S tier Mei, and then also moved into other heroes and grew there. Meanwhile, also like changing like what he does for the team and a lot of things about himself, where I was just like, okay, this guy's on a mission of self-improvement, and I'm happy to have him as part of the journey. And if I'm in that room and see he hasn't reached his potential yet, maybe I'll give him a little bit more time.
Sure. And I think that like that has to be the angle, right? That has to be why you would trigger an option for somebody like that who's extremely driven, is a great team player. You know, I think we've heard this from Christopher before, that like he is kind of like a really good teammate, somebody like you want to have around. It does feel like intangibles, because it sadly it doesn't seem like it is just skill just yet on the heroes that you would hope to see from a starting player.
Also, like, honestly, okay, let me ask you this, because let me not just say it, but imagine you are Hydron, and AT is assembling, and AT has Aspire and Speedily, let's say.
Yeah.
And the Spitfire comes knocking and says, you know, Sparker actually signed somewhere else. We need like a Western DPS that we can slot into a role. Which team are you joining if you're Hydron?
I think you have to go where you're going to start. I think that's where a lot of players would want to go, right? Like if I'm going to see a competitive offer, right? I can't imagine not Vancouver, but like just using them as an example. Like you talk about Aspire, you talk about assembling the AT core. I have to assume somebody around that budget, like mid to low table, is throwing around offers, and I feel like London probably could be at least remotely competitive, and offer you a starting position, right?
I think like in my mind, he's a good player for culture, Hydron, that is. I'm not sure if he fits into that, culture that they have.
Hard to say.
Yeah,
hard to say. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't.
Yeah,
that's something that you'd have to test out.
Like the funny, cheeky kid into a roster that, like, I don't know, like for me, like London are all turbo nerds. Like, it's a little different, right?
Sure.
So, yeah, but like, I know where I would take my career. Like, I wouldn't play second fiddle just to play with my friends. But
you would or wouldn't?
Wouldn't.
Yeah, agreed.
Right. I think also just given on the track record, and I think it's not as clear to me as I probably am voicing this right now, but yeah, like I don't know. I'd probably have a good long chat with Chris, what kind of things he wants to do with me and what he intends to do, and like, and then I would ultimately, trust a team that overperformed. So. Yeah.
I mean, you want to talk about Aspire. You want to talk about, again, we have no idea what's going on with Vancouver as of yet. Broy is yet to kind of push out any kind of contract statuses, unless I'm forgetting something. Maybe Eric can correct me if I'm wrong. But I think if you want to see, if you can't get Sparker back, which I have to assume, you talk about, building a talent funnel. I think both Chris and, Nuki and this coaching staff have, worked with Sparker long enough that they really want to get him back. I think that is going to be like a choice piece for them. I don't suspect that he'll leave, but if he did and Aspires is on the market, I don't think you're losing a lot if you had to go with Aspire. I think if anything, you might be upgrading a little bit, right? I think he is due for he's due for one. I think he's due for a solid team. And I think Vancouver can be that team for him, but I'm not mad at London maybe going that way as well. Solid looks overall from London. I think they keep all the pieces that I think you should. I think the culture is there. The coaching staff, you obviously want to keep locked down, obviously winning an award with Coach of the Year with Chris. Any final thoughts there before we wrap up? I know we wanted to get Toronto, but it looks like we're going to maybe save that for next week.
Sure. I think
anything with London?
Like, what's the date today? Do we have
16th?
Whoo, baby.
16th NA.
Yeah, okay. We're getting stuff next week, right? We'll have a lot to talk about. So, yeah, I think Toronto is one of those teams that is good to save for next year. For next week. Not next week.
Next year.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Anything coming down the pipeline for you? Anything?
Hell yeah, there is
going on. Okay.
I am expecting to do a coaching interview with Casaurus.
Cool.
And I'm working on a little something. You know, people on Twitter told me like they'd like to know about what the GMs are doing currently.
I heard people were interested in what I was doing, so I don't know. That's just me.
What? Me when I'm narcissism peeled. I might have a panel of general managers. We'll see. We'll try to get it on the road. Talk about off-season stuff, budget, strategy, all the good stuff. We'll see. I'm not sure how quickly that is possible, you know, or when the best opportunity is, because I think a lot of people wouldn't want to talk about strategy before the signing window actually pops. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, that's coming down the pike, I think. Once again, German build. But yeah, just expect a lot of off-season coverage. Of course, I'm also aware about the rumors that are currently going on, as always, other than in very, very special circumstances. I will probably not disclose that someone is in negotiation or anything with any team, but of course that is happening, and I'm following those. Maybe eventually expect some of the roster reports, you know, the types that we discussed before, where I, you know, create additional value. Maybe I'll just straight up roster report. Let's see.
Okay. All right. Lord Juicer may return. We'll have to see it. I'm working on a project that I keep adding to it. I've talked about it in some, you know, Discord channels. Probably it has a thick coat of dust on it in people's minds, which is probably for a good thing. It's a big project. I think it's probably my biggest undertaking. It's not going to be done for a while, so I'm not really going to talk about it. And that's pretty much it. I think I might play some RimWorld.
Same.
I mean, outside of just like being giddy at like the possibilities of what the off season could look like. Yeah, I don't know. Just finding something to do. Keep myself busy. But if you like this episode, if you thought it was interesting or it provided any kind of value to you, please do leave a like. If you want to support the show, but you can't do so monetarily, we would really love and appreciate if you would go to iTunes and download it. It's probably the only metric that I know of that corporations sponsor opportunities really look at these days, at least from that neck of the woods. It definitely helps us out. So if you can't necessarily support us monetarily, that would definitely help. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. This has been episode 270. We will see you next week for probably more of the same, probably a lot of more roster moves, but potentially some signings. So we'll have to see. So stay tuned. Keep it locked in. One Piece is real.
Peace.